Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. So today I got an exciting install. We actually have our Jeep back in the shop. So we're going to be changing up the front end a little bit, something that we really needed in Colorado. Well, I guess we never got into a situation where we needed it, but we were kind of close. So we went to Warn and got their new Zeon XD, the 10S. Got the Warn Winch Plate. You can see our synthetic winch line, all our install stuff. So this is the newest winch from Warn, and so I'm pretty excited to check it out and see how it does. So, and then also we got the solenoid. So I'll kind of talk a little bit more about that whenever we wire it up, but we're going to be wiring this to a switch, one of the factory Jeep switches, just so that it's not constantly draining off or running off the battery or connected to the battery. Even though a lot of people do it that way, I would rather just go ahead and connect it with a switch. So, yep, that's what we got. And then the other day, we actually did an install on my dad's Jeep. I didn't record it, but we installed the Evo on his. So he's got the 10S Evo, and I already got his factor 55 fairlead on there, which we don't have ours yet. I'll just be putting the Warn hook on today, and then I'm going to swap out with some factor 55 stuff afterwards. Once we're done with the install on ours, we're going to be... I might do a little comparison either in this video or another video. He hasn't pre-tensioned his winch rope yet, so I'll talk about that. And we'll have to obviously pre-tension ours. So whenever I do that, I'm going to do a little quick comparison between the two, maybe judge some pulling speeds and just kind of talk about the difference between the Warn Evo 10S and then the new Warn Zeon XD 10S. So anyway, we're going to get set up and start pulling the bumper off and get started. Getting started here, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to remove this plastic valance that's at the back. It won't be reused after you drop your winch in. I do think there is filler plates or something that you can get that will mount in there if that's an issue to you. I'm not really that worried about it, and it's just got these push tabs here, or little, pull the center out, pull the whole tab out. There's two of those, and we'll go ahead and get this center valance out of the way. So that's first. All right, so next up we're going to go ahead and remove this filler plate. So you've got, what is it, 5 bolts, and it holds this center section on right here, and that's going to be removed and won't be reinstalled because that's where your winch is going to be setting, obviously. So since the bumper is already mounted and it's just easier to work with, we'll go ahead and pull those 5 bolts and remove this center plate out and get our bumper prepped. Okay, so with your winch plate kit, at least with the Warn one, it came with the nuts that you need for these bolts. So we're going to reinstall these bolts with a nut underneath and just reinstall those. They're not going to be holding anything, it's just for looks to cover up all the holes that were there. So we'll go ahead and throw these 5 bolts back in with the supplied nuts from the Warn winch plate. Alright, so next up, we're going to remove the skid plate from the bottom. So you've got 2 in the rear and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 at the front, and they're all 13 millimeter, and then you'll drop this skid plate down. It is metal, so obviously once you start pulling out the last couple bolts, make sure you either got a good hold of it or somebody's giving you a hand with it. Okay, so next up we're going to get our license plate, this whole plastic piece out of the way that the license plate mount screws into. So there's just push tabs on the back, if I can find them. You just squeeze those in and just pop it out. Okay, so next we're ready to go ahead and pull the bumper. What we're going to do is, if you have the factory fog lights, you'll go ahead and unplug this plug over here. All right, so whenever you're removing the plug, so this is different than the way his was on his 22. If you've got a 24, you see you pull this little locking tab out, so that unlocks it, and then you actually slide the gray piece up, and as you slide it up, it will pull the plug out for you. So definitely a lot different than his as far as the style of how they did this plug. Kind of interesting. But and then one other thing that we have to do, if you ended up doing a filler plate, if you're running the stubby and you did this filler plate, you'll have to remove this to get to the bolts. So we're going to go ahead and remove our filler plates on both sides, and then you can get to 8 bolts altogether, 4 on each side of the frame, or 2 on each side of the frame on each side, so 8. We'll go ahead and unbolt the bumper and then pull it straight off. So after you remove your skid plate, these are what your bolts for your skid plate screw into. A lot of times they don't hold anymore, so just kind of keep an eye out for those. You might pull them off so you don't lose them. But like right then as I was undoing that, these three fell off, and these just hold the skid plate on the bottom of the bumper. So we're just gonna make sure we hang on to those and don't lose them. So now for the bumper itself, it's gonna be an 18 millimeter. At least I'm pretty sure. Yep, 18 millimeter. Okay, so now that we've got all 8 nuts off, we can go ahead and just pull the bumper straight off. And we'll go ahead and start prepping for the winch plate. Okay, so next up, we're gonna pull, so there's, these same 2 bolts are on both sides. These are for the mounting your skid plate. This is what your skid plate screws into, so this is your skid plate mounting bracket. You're gonna remove these 2 bolts right here, and you're gonna put this in just like that, and you're just gonna leave it just finger tight for now, and that way we can get our winch plate and get it all lined up before we tighten anything down. So again, remove these 4, throw your bracket on, and then put them back in finger tight. So on the passenger side, before you throw both of your bolts back in over here on the side, just go ahead and put in your bolts that come with your winch plate hardware. They're just a little square head here, and they slide in the back, because once this is up into place, it's really hard to get them in if you've got the electronic sway bar disconnect. So we'll go ahead and throw those 2 in on that side. The other side's easy to get it in. And again, we'll just keep everything finger tight so we can still move it around. That'll work. And now we're ready to get our winch plate. We'll go ahead and put in these other 2 carriage bolts, whatever you want to call them, into the back here. And then we're gonna set the winch plate up there and throw on the 4 nuts. Again, these are just finger tight. They're lock nuts anyway, so I'm just gonna run them down to the locking part. And then somebody's gonna have to hold this and we'll zip tie it in place, but first we'll get these nuts on. All right, so once all your nuts are on, I'm gonna line up these holes here, and then it comes with 1 big zip tie, and we're gonna zip tie that on the driver's side. It doesn't really matter, I guess, which side. We're gonna do the driver's side. I'm gonna go ahead and snug down these back 4 bolts, just a little bit, not all the way, but I'm gonna take some of the play out of these just to keep our winch plate kind of where we want it. And something else that doing that will help you do, it'll help keep that square peg down in that square hole, so that way it's not bouncing out on you. And with the winch in here, you're not trying to fight back here to hold those in place and tighten. So doing it before you put the winch in makes it a lot better. And we still got plenty of play in our winch bracket, and all of our holes are still lining up. So now we're ready to set the winch in and get it bolted down. So before you carry your winch over there and set it down onto the winch plate, you want to get it prepped. So with the Evo, it comes with 4 square nuts that slide into these sleeves. With the Zeon XD, it actually comes with just regular nuts, and they fit perfectly into these 4 slots. So you've got obviously 2 in the back, 2 in the front, and you want to go ahead and slide those in and prep them. Some people will put a little bit of tape over so they don't fall out. As long as you just carry it evenly and set it down evenly, they won't fall out and you'll be good to go. So that was all I was going to show you over here, is just prepping your winch and getting it ready. And then any wiring that you have on the back, the XD is already has it all prepped. So everything is already ready back here. On the Evo, we just had to kind of rearrange some wiring because the wiring comes out a little bit different on the Evo compared to the XD. But anyway, so you'll just carry it over as 1 unit. Just make sure you don't trip over your wiring or anything, and you'll set it down on the winch plate. And then you've got 4 bolts that will come up from the bottom. And what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and get them all started. Those are lock nuts in there, so we're going to go ahead and get them up into the locking part of the nut. But I'm not going to snug them down all the way just yet. I'm going to leave them a little bit loose just so maybe I can get a little bit more play to get to my bumper bolts whenever we're ready for that. So at this time, I'll go ahead and carry it over there and we'll get the bolts in. Fingers. Tell you one thing, this winch is a lot wider than the Evo for sure. So for now, we'll just get our wiring out of the way, and I'm going to go ahead and start those 4 bolts in the underneath. Like I said, just barely get them into the locking part of the nut, just to hold this where we want it. Okay, so what we're going to do next is we're going to go ahead and get the winch line started and get it into the drum properly. So because we're going to be tugging on the winch and everything else, I just grabbed some spare hardware. I'm going to throw a bolt through here on this passenger side, since that side does not have a zip tie. I'm just going to throw a bolt through there, and it's just for added security since we're going to be tugging on the winch line and everything else. I'm not going to tighten it down or anything. I'm just going to throw it in there to help support this side so that nothing wants to go anywhere. Okay, so there's a couple different ways as far as the order you can go in. What we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and hook up our winch line. After that point, we'll go ahead and run our power and get our power hooked up, and then we'll just go ahead and spool in the winch line, leaving about 5 feet out, and then from that point on, we'll go ahead and finish mounting the bumper. So at this point, you're going to have to get your little Warn kit to hook your winch up. So it comes with a zip tie. I'm not actually probably going to use the zip tie, but what you will use is this wire, and then you've got your hex key, little teardrop key that will go in there. So we'll need those two things out of there. And the other thing that you want to do is you've got this abrasive sleeve protector. It needs to go over this end. So we're going to go ahead and run this through onto our winch line, and notice we've got the red end of the winch line. It's kind of like your warning that you're almost at our winch line. So the bottom of the line turns red. That's when you're getting too far out. And so that side, which is the only side that can go to the winch, but it's the side that goes to the winch. So we're going to go ahead and slide our abrasive sleeve onto the winch line. We'll go ahead and run our winch line in. So obviously we want to make sure we go through the winch mount plate, and then we're going to go under the drum and get it around, fist around to the top of the drum. You want to be able to go down into this hole. So we're basically going to take this and run it down into there. So we'll go ahead and run our winch line through, our wire through the end. All right, so I just folded it over. We're going to run this through here. And then now we're going to take that and we're going to run it through here. All right, so you want your loop, the hole, to be right side up. So once you pull it through, then we'll put our tab in and we'll pull it into place. So right now I'm going to go ahead and soap it down. All we have is just soapy water. This was some Dawn dish soap and mixed with some water. I actually used it for a decal install on our old Jeep. So I'm just going to use that and soak everything down real good. Get it good and saturated, that way it'll slide better. Right, now I'm going to try to keep everything lined up the way I want it. I'm going to spin it around to where I can get to the wiring. I'm still in free spool right now. Alright, so now on the back side, I know you can't see it, but I'm looking at it. I'm making sure that that loop, the opening is up and everything is lined up the way I want it. Go a little bit further back, and then I'm going to engage my winch so that way it won't spin, and I'm going to pull that through that opening. Alright, so what I did, I just used some channel locks, wrapped the wiring around the channel locks, and then that way I can get a little bit more on it. And I'm just going to try to just work this winch line, make sure I got plenty of slack behind the drum, and just work it out until we can get that key in. Okay, so once I think I might have enough to get our key in. So this key, make sure it's focused on there, is got a teardrop shape. So you can notice one side is smooth, one side has this, and that's for if you ever want to remove your winch rope, you can get a screwdriver down in there and pry it out. So you want to make sure that that's up. Okay, hopefully you can see that. So like I said, our hex key is up. We're going to work that down into the winch line if I have enough of it out. If not, I might have to try to get some more through. Okay, so once that's in place, so there's no winch rope above or below our little hex key. It's seated between the winch rope on each side. Now we can go ahead and remove our wiring. All right, so the winch rope is going around the hex key. There's no winch rope showing, or kind of stuck above or below It's wrapped around that. So now what we'll do is I'll put it back in free spool, and I'm going to make sure everything stays where I want it. I'm going to pull it around the drum around. All right, and now I'll re-engage. So now we're pulling straight on. So whenever I pull on this, it's pulling straight through that hole. And now we're going to just pull, and then we'll check it and see if we got, you want to make sure it's all the way seated. So now we're just going to pull this winch rope back in to lock in that key. All right, so that was a few just little initial tugs, and I'm just going to check it, make sure everything's going in the way I want. So you got to put it back in free spool, spin it around. You should be able to see there, see how we still have winch rope and the key sticking out away, so we're not all the way there yet. We got to do some more pulling, but that's what you're looking for. You want to pull until you get a good flush surface around this drum, and that hex key is fully seated into its position. So I'll do the same thing, or it's still in free spool, so I'll just spin it back around until we're lined up, and then I'll give it a few more tugs and we'll get it nice and flush. Okay, so we got our winch line seated all the way. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and wire everything up, and then that way we can go ahead and run in our winch line and get, you know, just a few feet left out, and then we'll mount the bumper after that. So what we're going to do next is get our wires routed. So what we're going to do is I'm going to basically go inside the frame, keeping it as far away from the radiator and all the hot stuff as I can, and then we're going to run it up through just in a safe location. Obviously you want to get it away from moving parts and as far away from heat as possible. Your power cable does have, if you got the XD, now the Evo did not have a loom, this power wire in a loom, so that's another difference between the Evo and the Zeon XD, is the XD comes with your power wire already in a loom. So it's a little bit safer from the heat is what I was getting at. But anyway, either way, whether you have a loom, not have a loom, you want to get as far away from heat and moving parts as possible. So we're, like I said, we're just going to run our wiring up, and we'll bring it up on the side of the battery. Okay, so we got our wiring ran up and coming out just kind of like right here in front of the battery, towards the front of the Jeep, kind of coming out on the side of it there. So we got our wiring ran. Now what most people do is they'll go ahead and just direct connect the winch to the battery, which there's I guess technically there's nothing really wrong with that. However, if there ever was a failure inside of your winch, having it connected directly to the battery could cause a fire. I mean, surely it's fused somewhere inside the winch, but you know, I don't really know where you would get to a fuse inside the winch. So the safe thing to do and the smart thing to do is to set your winch up to a switch. Now obviously you don't want to run this thick, huge cable to a switch because that's obviously too much, everything like that. But so I went to Warn and I got their solenoid. So what this does is this will, basically the power will pass through the solenoid and will control the connect and disconnect with a switch inside the Jeep. Their solenoid does come with a switch if you wanted to mount one inside. Since we have the auxiliary switches with our Jeep, we're going to wire everything to an auxiliary switch inside the Jeep. We went and got this bracket. You can get it from like Home Depot, somewhere like that. Went ahead and just painted it black so it looked good. And we're going to go ahead and slide it underneath this tab right here, and we're going to mount it to the side right there. We've already checked clearance and everything. Everything's good with the hood. So we'll mount this right here, run our positive from our winch to one side. It comes with a cable to run it from this side to positive of the battery. And then our negatives, this will go to the negative battery side, and then we'll wire up our switches with these two wires right here, our switch, one switch. And then we'll go to our auxiliary switches, which the wiring is just kind of tucked up right beside the battery. So I'll uncover this and expose it. We'll talk about which wire goes to which switch. But for now, we're going to go ahead and mount the solenoid bracket. We'll go ahead and hook. I'm going to wait to hook our short power cable to the battery itself until I get everything wired in, and then I'll do that last. But as far as our negative and our positive coming from the winch, I'll go ahead and wire those up. On your solenoid, I don't know exactly if it has to be exact. With the way we have this solenoid sitting, with our two switch wires facing towards the driver's side of the Jeep, the rear post says that it's supposed to go to the accessory, which in this case is the winch. So I'm gonna, which actually works out good for us because of the length of the wiring I have, I'm gonna run it underneath and up, and I'm gonna hook it up Okay, now for our negative cable from the winch, we'll go ahead and just mount it to the battery. I'm just making sure the wiring is ran kind of where I want it. While I'm here, I'll just go ahead and connect this. I'm just not going to hook it up to the battery yet, but this is the supplied with the solenoid, the shorter power cable, so I'm going to go ahead and hook it up, and I'm just not going to connect it to the battery just yet. So next up, so again, your auxiliary wiring, if your Jeep came with the auxiliary switches, these are just loomed up on the side. So, and then it's just kind of, it's wrapped up in the tape or whatever. It's pretty easy to find. It's just on the side of your battery. Once you unwrap it, you'll see that you got 4 wires because you got 4 switches. So switch 1 is this beige and pink. It's a 40 amp. Switch 2 is a green and pink. And then your other 2 switches are what, 20 amp?
15.
15 amp. So your orange and pink is switch 3, and then your blue and pink is switch 4. Okay, so we're gonna use, we don't have anything hooked up yet, obviously. So we're gonna use beige and pink and just put my winch on switch 1. And then down the road, whenever we do lighting, we'll use some of these others. But for now, that's all we need is just this beige and pink. Okay, so now for the wiring to our switch, if your solenoid is oriented the same way as mine, this rear outside post, we've already got it all connected and wired up. That will be the power wire to your switch, which is going to go to your power wire on your vehicle. All right, so we'll just crimp that down. Make sure we got a good connection on both sides, and then we'll shrink wrap it, seal that up. And again, we use the 40 amp fuse or 40 amp switch inside the vehicle. I don't necessarily know if you need a 40 amp switch just because you're running through the solenoid. Really, the only power that's going to this is just a 12 volt supply to the solenoid to either open or close that connection with the battery itself. You're not actually going to get the full amperage of the battery onto this, but either way, we're still just going to go ahead and use the 40 amp just because we're not using it anyway. And later on, if I had to switch it, I can always switch it. It's not that big of a deal. Now on this other side of the terminal is just a negative. So we've obviously got plenty of wire here, but this is just going to go to one of the negative posts on the side of the engine bay here. And since the Jeep is off, there's no power being run to the solenoid. So right now, this should be open and disconnected. And now this wiring, we'll just kind of wrap it all up nice and neat. If we ever have to get to our switches, we'll have to unwrap it. So don't have to go too crazy, just get it nice and neat, and then we'll get it all taped down out of the way and to the side of the firewall. Now our wiring is done. So we're gonna go inside the Jeep, and I'm gonna go ahead and turn on the Jeep, and we'll get that switch set up, that switch 1. Okay, so once you're inside the Jeep, I think I got you set up where you can see everything. So to set up your switches, so I went ahead and started the Jeep. You'll go into vehicle, you'll go into the far right and go to settings, and this is on the 2024s. It might be a little bit different. And then over here on the left, you've got all your different options. But if you scroll down, you'll see aux switches. You'll click on that. We're going to aux 1, that's our first switch. And this is all actually the way we want it. So for type, you can go to momentary. So basically all that's doing is, if you're holding down that switch and holding down that button, it will give everything power, or whatever's to that switch, it'll give it power. As soon as you let go of that button, it will turn off the power. So we want latching, where we'll push it, it'll stay on, and then whenever we push it again, it'll stay off. And so we don't want momentary for this. Next is the power source. So you can either choose to have it powered up with just a battery. So if the vehicle's off, you can still turn that switch on and turn it on. Now with a winch, we only want the winch running whenever the ignition is on. So we're going to go to ignition over there on the far right, make sure ignition's selected. And then recall last state is pretty much if we turn that button on, and then once we turn off the Jeep and turn it back on, without that being on, the winch will be off. So if we turned it on, if we said recall last state and we turned that on and it was highlighted, if we turned on the winch and then, we went into town and ate, we were done winching, turned the Jeep off, turn it back on, no matter what, that's going to stay on until we turn it off. We're just going to leave that off, because if we get out, if there's some reason that we turned off the Jeep and then we're getting out, I would just rather the power be killed, and that way I don't forget about it and accidentally leave it on. So this is the settings we're using. Again, we're using lashing, power source ignition, and recall last state is off. So our switch is set up. So now down here at the bottom, of course you can't see, but now, you know, if we hit aux 1, right now our winch is powered up, which is what we want, and the vehicle is running, so now it's got power to it, and we heard the solenoid kick on, and now if we hit it again, we can hear that solenoid kick off, and that's what we want. We just want to make sure that that solenoid is kicking on and engaging, and then kicking off and disengaging whenever the switch is off or on. So now we'll go ahead and move back out. We'll leave the Jeep running. We'll move back out. We're going to hook up our winch wire, or our control, and we're going to go ahead and roll this winch line in. Okay, so I've hooked up the controller. My dad's going to work the controller, and all I'm going to do is just kind of hold the winch line tight as I go. I am going to get our abrasion sleeve, move it down towards the end, and we're just going to roll this in up until we get about, I don't know, maybe 5 feet left out, and then we'll go ahead and finish doing the mounting for the bumper. And yeah, always just make sure you're getting the habit of using a good pair of gloves whenever you're winching. Even though you don't have to worry as much with synthetic rope, it's still a good idea to wear gloves while you're working with the winch line. So yeah, as he's sucking it in, I'm just going to try to zigzag it onto the drum. Of course, we're still going to bring it back out and put tension on this. This is just a temporary to finish up the install, and then we'll actually pre-tension the winch rope here in a minute. All right, so not the prettiest spool on there, but again, like I said, we're gonna pull all that back out, pre-tension it. That's basically, now we can go ahead and finish our install of the bumper. So I'm gonna go ahead and kill the Jeep, and then we'll go ahead and move on to our bumper and get it prepped. These wires right here, they were mounted up here. We just undid those, the ones, just the two right below where your mounting bolts are, and we're just making sure that that stays out of the way. All right, so we're gonna bring the bumper over here, and we're gonna go ahead and run our winch rope through the bumper, and then we're gonna get it up here in position. I'll remove this bolt that's holding this passenger side, remove that, and then we'll slide the bumper on. It's a little bit tedious because once you remove that bolt, even no matter how tight you get this zip tie, it still wants to adjust on you, or wants to move around on you. So this side's great. This side, once we pull this, is not gonna be as great. As you can see, if you can see that, it drops down and away, especially with the weight of this winch. And then on this zip tie, make sure that it doesn't get in your way. You can snip off the top. You'll be able to snip off the rest here in a minute, but go ahead and cut that top off so that your bumper isn't dragging on it. All right, so just like that, now we'll throw all of our nuts back on. Oh, and again, once you get it up and on, just double check that wiring. When you look at that wiring on that side on the bottom, and make sure that the wiring's not caught. Now these inside bolts, especially with the size of this winch, it was a little bit easier with the Evo. The Zeon XD is 3 inches wider overall, so an inch and a half on each side. So it's really hard to get to these inside bolts. One thing that you can do is take some painter's tape, wrap it around your nut, and then slide your socket onto it so it stays on the socket. So that's what I'm about to do to try to get my inside nuts started, but we got the outside ones started. Okay, so you can see we pulled the bumper back off. So two things. We left the winch bolts underneath the winch. We left those loose. Whenever you put the bumper back on, you can't get to the front two to get the proper torque, which is only 35 pounds. It would be fine to just do it with a wrench if you did have your bumper on. I mean, it's just 35 foot-pounds. It's not that big of a deal. However, since we went ahead and mounted our fairlead, because this is the way that we saw someone else do it, and so we didn't do it this way on his Jeep, but it was going to be easier to do it this way. Well, you kind of got issues either way, to be honest. So whenever you go ahead and mount your fairlead in this plate, you end up hitting the winch plate. And I could tell that it was hitting it good enough that it was bowing the bumper, and it just wasn't right. However, whenever you put all this up on there without the fairlead in, and then you put the fairlead on afterwards, the supply bolts are not long enough. So you're kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't. Like I said, so if I did it this way, I could probably force it, but you can tell, you can see here where the head of those bolts are hitting the winch plate. And obviously it's going to be stronger if we would go ahead and bolt through that. However, I'm not going to be able to use any of the supplied hardware that came with the kit, which sucks because this whole kit is made for a JL. So it's like, I mean, a JL with a factory steel bumper, and yet they're giving you hardware that it doesn't work. So I'll find some bolts that work with these black button heads because I like these black button head bolts. So I'm going to find some a little bit longer bolts that work with these. We're going to go ahead and pull this off. I'm going to go ahead and torque the winch bolts up underneath the winch to 35 foot-pounds. I'm going to go ahead and torque all 4 of those. And then we're going to pull the fairlead off. We're going to get the bumper on, and then we'll work the fairlead on, which is going to be a pain because you don't have a lot of finger room to get the bolt down behind the bumper, but it's doable. It's possible. So anyway, that's kind of the issues that we run into with this particular kit. Same thing with the Evo. We had the same issues with his fairlead on the Evo. We had to get different bolts for his fairlead because the bolts aren't long enough to go through the winch plate and the bumper and the fairlead. I don't know why they don't just give you longer bolts that work, since this, like I said, it's a vehicle specific kit, but whatever. Okay, so next, he's gone to get some new bolts. I have a huge bucket of bolts. However, it's not organized, so it kind of takes a while. So he just decided to run down to Tractor Supply, and he's going to get us some good grade 8 bolts for the fairlead. So in the meantime, I'm going to go ahead and get the bumper back on, just like we had planned before. Brackets are on the outside, and that little notch is supposed to go out. And then this wiring for our fog lights is kind of tucked down just a little bit, just so it doesn't get caught behind any plates. So now I'm gonna get it up into place. Your bumper bolts that go into the frame, those, the best I can find as far as online and everything, is 90 foot-pounds is the torque spec according to Jeep. Finally got all 4 torqued to 90. Man, those ones in the middle are a pain. And also getting this fairlead in is definitely going to be a pain. You have a lot less space than you did on the Evo. However, we can fish them in. I'm not worried about it. We can get it. Okay, so we're still waiting on him to get back with the bolts. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and get my wiring tucked up in a way. And it's pretty obvious. You'll see once you get to your fog light wiring underneath, you'll see a hole in the winch plate, and that's for that Christmas tree to plug into. So you just want to make sure that all your fog light wiring along the bottom is tucked up above where your skid plate will be, and plugged into those little holes where the Christmas tree goes. And then I'm going to plug back in the fog light plug, so all our wiring will be good to go. Okay, before the skid plate, we'll go ahead and tighten up the rest of this hardware. So you got the 2 bolts that go into your skid plate bracket, and then you got the 2 bolts on the back of the winch plate itself. So we'll go ahead and get all those completely snugged up, so 8 all together. We'll get those snugged up, and then our winch plate will be completely mounted to the Jeep. So we'll snug all those up, and then we'll bring the winch plate in and get the winch plate put on. Okay, so now we're ready to get our fairlead on. What we did is we fished our bolts in from here in the front. Got a bolt, a washer in, and all we did was just get 1/4 inch longer bolts. They are grade 8 hardware and everything, so it's good hardware. But yeah, so he's gonna hold one side, I'm gonna hold the other. You can just barely reach in there and get your finger on these, and then after we're done, we'll try to figure out how we're gonna get a wrench on them to actually tighten this stuff down. So next we're gonna throw on the plate and the fairlead, and then try to get our bolts and stuff on. So he's gonna work one side, I'm gonna work the other, and we'll just try to work it that way. All right, and we forgot the Loctite, so I'm gonna go grab that. And now you do have some play in this, so I'm just kind of trying to figure out where I want it. So as you can see, it can come up, that bottom plate can come up quite a bit. So I'm going to attempt to use just an offset wrench to get down in there, but I don't know if I'm going to be able to. All right, that wasn't really holding, so I'm going to try to attempt to put a wrench in here and hold it that way. Got it. If you're still even looking. Yeah, you are. All right. All right, so that was a little bit of finagling there, but now we are officially done with the, as far as mounting the winch. Need to wipe all this down, get our handprints and all our nasty stuff off all of it. So now we are ready to throw our winch hook on, which for now I'm just using the one that came with it, the Warn one. I'm gonna be getting a factor 55. I just haven't ordered my factor 55 stuff yet. Okay, so for your winch hook, your cotter or your retaining pin should be, trying to get the camera to focus, should be going in on this side, and then your cotter pin should be on the opposite side of your hook. So whenever you install your winch rope, you want to make sure it stays that way. So we'll just pull that out. We'll slide our winch rope in. Reinstall that retaining pin like that with the cotter pin hold down away from the hook opening, and then we'll reinstall our cotter pin, and that's it. Okay, so I changed my mind. I'm actually gonna save the winch comparison video and the pre-tensioning for a whole separate video. So I'm gonna go ahead and wrap this one up today with just the winch install. I think that's good enough for one video. And then, like I said, yeah, next week we'll do the comparison between the Evo and the Zeon XD, and then we'll pre-tension both winches and kind of see how they pull and everything. So, but yeah, there it is for today. That's it. Of course, Texas, unfortunately, we have to have that front license plate, which is super annoying. I wish I could take that off, but oh well, it is what it is. So got to leave it there. But man, I think it looks amazing. And for anybody that's curious, I did actually measure the ride height before and after, and that went, of course, I haven't drove it and let it settle in, but it dropped it right at about a 1/4 inch. So that's how much that weight, and I'll get you the weight specs in the next video because I don't remember right offhand right now. But yeah, we got it in, and it only dropped us about a 1/4 inch, so we're still riding pretty good. And man, I think it looks amazing, especially the Zeon XD, since it's a black winch and you got a black fairlead. Man, just really looks good. Can't wait to get the factor 55 fairlead on there, or not fairlead, but the factor 55. We're gonna go with their Flat Link E, I think is what it is. So we're gonna go with that one, but yeah, looks pretty good. I'm glad we got it all wrapped up. All right guys, thanks for joining me, and we'll see you next time.